The cattle were facing upriver. Edilson saw them from the cassava plot, 40 meters of turned earth between him and the fence line, the plants knee-high and needing another week before they'd be ready to mound. He had been pulling weeds since midday. The sun was behind him and the sweat on his back had dried and started again twice. He straightened up and looked. His 12 animals stood in a line along the bank, all of them oriented north. Not grazing, not moving. Their muzzles pointing upriver, ears forward, tails down. He had been farming this stretch of várzea for 11 years. He had learned it the way you learn a person you live with, not by studying it, but by moving through it daily until the knowledge stopped being knowledge and became body. He knew which section of bank softened first in the chia, which of the cassava beds would flood before he'd expect it, which month the soil shifted from red to gray at 6 inches down, and what that shift meant for planting. He knew the cattle. He knew what they did, and when and why. He had never seen them stand like that. Davi was sitting on an upturned crate near the water tank, eating a mango he'd taken from the kitchen without asking. He'd been there most of the afternoon, watching Edilson work, occasionally checking his phone for the signal it hadn't found since he'd arrived 2 days ago. He was wearing the same clean shoes he'd come with. They were still clean. Between them, there was the unspoken fact of Manaus, the logistics job, the apartment, the life that made a kind of sense Edilson's didn't, or a different kind of sense, or whatever it was. Davi thought when he looked at this land and this house and his older brother's hands. "Your cows are acting strange," Davi said. Edilson walked to the fence. He put both hands on the top wire. The wire was vibrating, not much, less than wind makes it vibrate, less than the wash from a cargo boat on the main channel, a low, continuous tremor that he felt in his palms and up through his wrists. He held his hands there for a moment and then took them off and looked at the river. The water looked the same, brown-green in the afternoon light, moving at its ordinary pace, carrying leaf matter and pale foam the way it always did in February. The chia was weeks early this year. He'd known it for 10 days, had moved the lowest equipment to the high shelf in the barn, had already decided which of his neighbors he'd asked to take the cattle upland if the flooding came fast. The river was running high, but it looked the same. Beyond his fence line, he could see 3 of Sutoniko's animals on the adjacent várzea, all of them facing the same direction. Further upriver, at the bend where the Figueiredo land curved out of sight, he could see more of them. Distant shapes along the bank, standing still. All of them. Every animal he could see on the várzea, facing upriver, not grazing. He stood at the fence for another minute. Then he went back to the plot and picked up his hoe and continued working. "You're not worried about that?" Davi said. "Working," Edilson said. He worked for another 20 minutes, checking the cattle every few minutes without stopping, peripheral glances over the fence line. They didn't move. Davi gave up talking and went back to his crate and his phone. A boat went upriver on the main channel, the sound of its motor reaching them a few seconds after it appeared, and Edilson tracked it with his eyes without turning his head. It passed. The cattle didn't react to it. The birds stopped. He felt the absence before he understood it as a thing that had happened. The usual afternoon noise of the forest behind the house, the parrots and the cecropia trees, the constant low canopy traffic of things moving through branches, it stopped. Not with alarm calls, not all at once. It simply fell away over the course of 2 or 3 minutes until the only sounds were the river and Davi's mango. Edilson set down his hoe. He stood still with his feet on the ground and felt the soil through the soles of his boots. The várzea was soft in February, always soft, holding the memory of last year's flood. But there was something in the soil now that wasn't the softness, a pressure beneath it, a low insistence that came from below and moved upward to his feet and into his calves and stopped somewhere around his knees. Not pain, not vibration exactly, or not only vibration. Something shifted in the condition of standing. His feet knew it first, then his calves, then his knees, a pressure coming up from below that wasn't the softness of the ground. He had no word for what he was feeling. He was not a man who looked for words when his hands could do something instead. He looked at the cattle. The nearest one, the old brown cow he'd had since she was a calf, who he'd pulled through a bad birth 2 years ago, and whose temperament he trusted, was walking into the river. Not in flight, not calling. She walked down the bank the way she walked to water on any afternoon, unhurried, placing her feet. She walked until the water reached her chest and she stopped, facing upriver. The others followed, one by one, then in pairs, then the remaining 4 at once. They walked into the river and they stood there, chest deep, muzzles forward, and the river moved around them without disturbing them. Davi was at the fence saying his name. Edilson was already moving, not toward the cattle but toward the barn. He went in and got the rope from the hook near the door and a second rope from the peg beside it and came back out and took Davy's arm and pulled him away from the fence. What are they doing? Come away from the fence. Are they sick? Is this? Come away. They walked back toward the house. Edilson coiled the ropes over his shoulder without thinking about it, the way his hands did things when his mind was somewhere else. He looked across the fence line at Sutoniko's house. Windows shuttered against the afternoon heat. Sutoniko would be inside sleeping. He thought about the land registry letter. January, posted in town on a Thursday, the envelope sealed before he let himself think about it too carefully. The encroachment was real, 12 meters of várzea that Sutoniko's fence had moved over 3 seasons, a little each year, gradual enough to be almost deniable. Edilson had measured it himself. He had not said anything to Sutoniko directly, had not knocked on the fence post and said, "You know what you've done." He had sent the letter instead, which would result in a fine Sutoniko could not easily pay. The encroachment was real. He was right to report it. He had done it partly because of the encroachment and partly because of something that had happened 4 years ago, a thing between them that had never been spoken and that Edilson did not examine directly even now, even in the privacy of his own thinking. The horror didn't care about any of this. Neither did the river. He would understand neither of these facts until much later, and even then, not fully. He went into the house and got his waterproof bag from under the bed and put the bolt keys in it, and his documents and the money from the kitchen drawer. He went to the window that faced the river. Below the floodplain, below the root systems of the riverside trees, below the layer of sediment that the Amazon had been depositing here for millions of years, below the clay and the silt and the compressed organic record of everything that had ever died in the watershed above, something was moving upriver. It had been moving for 11 days. It moved because this was what it did, because this was a point in a recurrence that had no name in any language spoken along this river or any river, because no language had developed in proximity to it. The tributary was incidental to its movement. The floodplain was incidental. The 12 cattle standing in the water, the 2 men in the house, the sleeping man in the adjacent property, all of it incidental, in the way that the soil is incidental to whatever moves through soil. It was very large. The sediment compressed and re-expanded in its passing. The water table shifted laterally, perceptibly, for perhaps 200 meters on either side of its course. The root systems of the flooded forest trees along the bank transmitted the displacement the way root systems transmit everything, through contact, without interpretation. The birds had gone because their bodies met something their nervous systems had no name for and defaulted to flight. The cattle had walked into the river because the pressure in the ground was less than the pressure in the water, and their bodies found the water. None of this would leave a visible record. The sediment would carry a faint compression signature for perhaps 30 years before the river reconfigured it. There would be nothing else. It would pass through this section of the tributary in approximately 30 minutes. The pressure in Edilson's legs had moved up into his chest. Not pain, a fullness, a sense of his body being occupied by a frequency it hadn't produced, a resonance in the cavity of his chest that was just below what the ear picks up. He put his hand flat against his sternum. His heart was beating normally. The resonance wasn't his heart. His sense of vertical was slightly off. The house had not moved. He kept making small adjustments for a lean that wasn't there. Edilson, something is, my ears. Get your bag, Edilson said. Right now. What is? Bag. Now. Come. Davy got his bag. Edilson went out and across the yard to the bank where the boat was tied. He untied it and held it by the rope. Davy came down the bank too fast, grabbing Edilson's arm to stop himself going into the water. Edilson looked across the fence at the shuttered windows of Sutoniko's house. He held the rope and looked at the windows. He thought about the 40 minutes he didn't have and didn't know he had. He thought about Sutoniko asleep inside with the shutters closed in the afternoon heat. He thought about the letter. He thought about the older thing. He got in the boat. Get in, he said. Davy got in. Edilson started the motor. It caught on the second pull, as it always caught on the second pull, and he felt a flat animal gratitude for that, and he backed them off the bank and turned the bow downriver. He kept his eyes on the river ahead. The familiar bends, the tree line on both banks, the afternoon light breaking up on the water. Davy held the gunwale with both hands. After a minute, Davy said, "The cows are still in the river," and Edilson said nothing. The pressure in his chest faded as they moved downriver. His inner ear remained off, a mild, persistent disorientation, a lag between the boat's movement and his body's accounting for it. He kept adjusting for it and watching the river. In his chest, the resonance diminished, thinned, and then was not there. He did not look back for the first 10 minutes. When he looked back, the river behind them was ordinary. The forest on both banks unchanged. The sky above the area where his land was, visible above the tree line from here, the same blue-white it had been all afternoon. An ordinary sky. He turned back to the river ahead. 2 minutes later, the surface of the river upstream changed. He cut the motor. They drifted. The river moved them slowly. Edilson watched the water upriver, perhaps a kilometer back, perhaps more. The surface there had shifted into a different relationship with the afternoon light. Not broken, not churned, nothing he could point to and describe. It was as if the river's surface had altered its quality slightly, the way polished wood changes under your palm, the same surface, catching the light differently. The same river. He looked at it for a long time and could not find the word for what he was seeing. The feeling came through the hull, up through the aluminium and into the soles of his feet and up through his legs, the same low insistence, but brief now, the last of something enormous passing. His vision smeared at the edges for a moment, went soft and then clear. He felt his body make a small adjustment, automatic, a muscular recoordination like compensating for a wake before you've seen the wake. The adjustment happened, and then there was nothing to adjust for. Beside him, Davi folded forward over his knees. He pressed his forehead to his forearms and stayed there. The river resumed its ordinary light. Edilson sat very still. He put both hands on his own knees and looked at the water upstream until it looked the way it had always looked. Then he started the motor and ran them downriver. He tied up at the town dock 40 minutes later. Davi got out and sat on a bollard with his elbows on his knees and stared at the dock planking and said nothing. Edilson stood at the end of the dock and looked back upriver. The sky was ordinary, heat haze above the tree line. A large cargo boat coming downriver in the distance, riding low in the water, laden, moving at its working pace. He watched it come. It passed a stretch of river above his land. It did not slow. The figures on its deck moved at their ordinary pace. A man leaned over the rail and spat into the water and straightened up and went somewhere. People moved on the dock around Edilson. A woman unloading plantains from a small boat. 2 men with the fuel drum. A child running for reasons of her own. All of them moving at the speed of an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Davi came back with 2 water bottles. He held one out. Edilson took it. "What was that?" Davi said. His voice was level and strange. "What was that?" Edilson drank. He didn't answer. "The cows went into the river," Davi said. "All of them just walked into the river." "I know." "And then in the boat." Davi stopped. He looked at his hands, then at the river, then at Edilson. What was in the boat? Edilson capped the water bottle. He took his phone out and looked at it. Fernanda would be at her mother's, helping with the evening meal. He should call her. He stood holding the phone. He looked upriver. He got back in the boat. "Hey," Davi, from the dock, standing up. "Where are you going?" Edilson untied the rope. "Edilson." Something shifted in Davi's voice. "Where are you going right now?" "Sutarnico's place," Edilson said. Davi stood on the dock with the water bottle in his hand. His mouth opened. He looked at the river, at the boat, at his brother. "It's still out there," he said. "Whatever that was, it's still." "It went upriver," Edilson said. "It's upriver." He did not know this with certainty. He believed it the way he believed things about the land, from the body, from everything he had learned about what things do and where they go. He turned the boat and brought the motor up. Edilson. He turned upriver into the afternoon and ran the motor out and did not look back at his brother on the dock. The river was the same. The forest on both banks was the same. The light was long now, the afternoon going gold, the shadows of the riverside trees beginning to reach across the water. He passed the first bend and the town disappeared behind him. He passed the second bend and his land came into view. The house, the barn, the cassava beds, the fence line. Everything standing. He could see the bank where he kept the boat, the bare patch of earth where his feet had worn the grass down. He could not see the cattle from here. He did not stop at his own bank. He went past it and turned into the narrower channel between his land and Sutarnico's, cut the motor, and drifted to the neighbor's dock. He tied up and walked to the house. He knocked on the door. He waited. He knocked again. So Tomiko opened the door in the rumpled way of a man woken from sleep, eyes adjusting, shirt untucked, not yet sure what he was looking at. He looked at Edilson for a moment. His expression was the expression it always was when he looked at Edilson now, the expression that held the letter and the fine and the older thing, and held none of them on the surface. He was alive. He had slept through it. "Edilson," he said. "Your cattle," Edilson said. "Check your cattle." He turned and walked back down to the boat. Behind him he heard Sutoniko step off the doorstep and stand in the yard, heard him call something, a name, one of his sons maybe, or just a sound. But Edilson was untying the boat, and he didn't stop. He turned upriver. He would find his cattle, or he would not find them. He would call Fernanda in an hour, or he would call her now. His brother was at the town dock and would get a room at the one guest house, or he would not. And tomorrow there would be the question of the land and what he'd lost on it, and what the Chia would do to the rest. All of that was ahead of him, and it was all the ordinary work of a life, and he would do it. He turned the boat and ran the motor upriver toward his land in the last of the afternoon light, and the river moved past him, the way the river always moved, carrying everything downstream.